Pope Francis, President Trump, and Mr. Larry Fink, April 29, 2020 by Anna von Reitz. Notice to principals as notice to agents as notice to principals. Mr. Fink has bonded $6 trillion worth of federal debt. He has now called in the debt for lack of security, and thereby bankrupted the perpetrators of the federal debt. The problems are: 1. The federal debt doesn't exist. It only exists on paper because our national credit has not been applied to balance the books. So either the bookkeeping needs to take place or the bogus debt needs to be discharged, one way or the other, and we don't care which. 2. The securities bonded by Mr. Fink are illegal, and represent living flesh involuntarily and unconscionably contracted and impersonated under conditions of non-disclosure and deceit. The serial numbers and certificates all go back to living people who have been illegally and immorally latched and attached to the bonds without their knowing or voluntary consent. Mr. Fink has cause for complaint against the perpetrators, the Holy See, the Queen, Westminster, but no valid claim against any defrauded American born on our soil and mischaracterized as any form of U.S. citizen. 3. Mr. Fink's corporations are all chartered by our states of the Union, including Delaware and New York and California, et alia, with the result that Mr. Fink's assets are in fact our assets, and his claims against our assets are claims against his assets. As you can see, Mr. Fink has no assets and no position to buy, sell, or bankrupt anything related to us or our states. In view of the widespread constructive fraud scheme that has been employed by minions of the Crown and members of the U.S. Congress and the Municipal Congress of the United States seeking to deliberately misidentify American babies as wards of their states of states, and in full view of the heinous nature of this activity and unconscionable nature of the resulting contracts, Mr. Fink needs to be informed that he has $6 trillion worth of fraudulent securities or thereabouts on his hands, and the only remedy open to him is to seek reimbursement from the Crown, the Holy See, and the Queen's government. He, Larry Fink, cannot be allowed to continue to try to peddle these illegal securities to any third party, as in his recent efforts to offer them to President Xi. Ironically enough, we have some sympathy for him and for the Israeli banks and the Israeli government, which have backed the bonds he is trying to trade, cash, or otherwise offload, but the responsibility for this circumstance is not ours and cannot be used to harm or in debt or excuse any military or mercenary action on our shores whatsoever. We have had reports of Israeli mercenaries on our soil, leading attacks against former Pentagon employees. This activity needs to stop immediately and permanently while the principals work out a solution. We also note that the same Israeli banks and Israeli government are greatly in our debt, and that those debts have not been settled, so that Mr. Fink's activities appear to be invalidated in another way as well. The Crown, the Queen, and the Holy See may owe the American states and people $6 trillion worth of damages, but so then does the bonding company and its backers. Not only that, but the same parties, the Israeli banks and the Israeli government offering to bankrupt our territorial government, owe us in excess of $100 trillion, so what kind of game is this? Our subcontractors owe them $6 trillion, while they owe us $100 trillion, and they want to foreclose? We are the lawful government of this country and we insist that this entire mess gets straightened out according to our will, our treaties, and our commercial contracts with the Crown, the Queen, and the Holy See without further delay, excuse, dalliance, obfuscation, or deceit. Obviously, someone siphoned $6 trillion and it went somewhere. It did not go to the people of this country to whom it was owed. Similarly, the Chinese trade deficit was created by siphoning and swindling, and all that money didn't get where it was going, either. The pipeline transfer agents are the obvious place to start looking for all the missing credit, and the securities oversight organizations are another, as well as the banks which have been operating illegally since 1934 in this country. But again, we only observe the obvious, and neither we nor the states and people that we represent are responsible for any of it, and we do not intend to be blamed for it or billed for it. James Clinton Belcher, Head of State, the United States of America. Anna Maria Riesinger, Fiduciary, the United States of America.